getting to know another person, testing for compatibility, thinking about shared interests, the economic viability of the partnership, and the equitable sharing of household chores. As romance becomes pleasure, love becomes more like work. We have to work on our relationship. But love is not all work. It's also crucially passion and romance. And having taken the romance out of it, so to speak, we're faced with having to put it back in somehow. As is, right? You see the way the two pressures go, right? So we can separate sex from love, and that means that we don't have to think of every sexual encounter as potentially a love or marriage-related encounter. But then once we do that, when we think about marriage, we're not just thinking about what starts with that flash, we're thinking about other considerations that might lead us to consider getting married after we've done this. And that takes on a whole new set. You can look at what's happened to marriage advice manuals, in which a whole lot of it used to be just about sex and other things. Now it's about economic stability. Have you asked these questions? Can you afford to get married? Can you fight all those things? A popular model of how to put the romance back in, this is put the romance back in your marriage. Right, this is the story. To do this is punctuated equilibrium. And punctuated equilibrium is very much like closure, exit. Right? The equilibrium is the closure, the punctum is the exit. You can gauge its popularity from the fact that whole industries exist to help script the punctuation, the romantic interludes. An intimate dinner with a good bottle of wine, the restaurant industry is there to sell it to us. A gateway for two to South Sea and Island Beach, the tourist industry. Interflora, Hallmark, Victoria's Secret, all you need is a credit card. Of course, it isn't as if you just had these ideas about what romance consists in, and then the market obligingly responded. It's rather that the market, through advertising, movies, television, magazines, and other mass media, sold you both the ideas and the consuming ways to put them into practice. Romance, like fashion, is off the rack. And it's work's way of helping love and romance, and work itself, of course, to peacefully coexist. So think about, right, here's the great example of outsourcing. Second sons in Britain didn't inherit any property. They had to find jobs. And they were limited for aristocrats, aristocratic families. They were limited in Britain because you couldn't go work. It was beneath you. So they went to the colonies, right? They sent them out of the country. Go do it out there. And out there they started families and made wealth for themselves. Now, part of what happens is this. Think the work world and the changing sexual mores have put pressure on marriages, which they've responded to in part by coming, to some extent, more businesslike. But then there's also a need to put the romance into the business, which now the business world responds to by selling you the romance that you need to put into your marriage, because your marriage is part of the world that this is the way these structures work. It's a very good way to see it, right? You may be making Hallmark cards, right? Or working for a travel agency, part of the business of which is to sell romantic trips, which you yourself will buy because you need the romance just as much as others. And this picture of punctuated equilibrium is not a stupid model either. So you might think of it the way we do with work and leisure. We think of leisure as punctuating, right? This is the part we need to establish a kind of equilibrium between the two sides of our lives. And I think that's a good way to imagine not just our love lives, but our lives more generally, is that we want to make them, right? We want to have exit, closure, equilibrium, and punctuations that relieve it. So you might think of temporary exits from the closure that make the closure more bearable. That would be one of the ways to look at it. The educated postmodern lover, this is again a character from a sociology study, of the ubiquitous use of romance to sell commodities, sees that in the privacy of our words and acts of love, we rehearse cultural scenarios that we didn't write. So she treats her romantic beliefs with the skeptical irony of post-Marxian and post-Freudian consciousness. That's a quote. The culturally deprived, on the other hand, still continue to find the formulas of romance compelling. The cost of cultural wealth is cultural alienation. The cost of cultural deprivation is inauthenticity, and of course, a mounting credit card bill. So notice the two thoughts, right? You can, look how we are now, right? We all know this, don't we? We think, yeah, of course, we understand. There's a way, there's something we can't do because of what we know that we could have done before we knew it, right? We can't see our love lives as authentically ours because we know that they've been colonized by the surrounding socioeconomic structure. Right? We know that our very ideas of what it is to do something romantic, right, are already scripted, charted, and we know this. So there's a way in which, right, we can't ourselves think, oh, this is me at my most authentic, doing what is most authentically mine with somebody with whom I'm having this most intense of personal and wholly individual relations. We just can't have that innocent thought that way. If we were ignorant of it, as many are, of course, we would think we were being wholly authentic, and these lives were really and fully ours. So part of the irony, part of the need for a kind of cultural irony that our world produces is that it can't tolerate knowledge of itself. It presupposes a blind spot, right? Because as soon as you see through the practices, they become things that you can't inhabit with full degrees of authenticity. So you can be struck by that thought, right? So notice that's another one of exit and closure, right? You took an exit, namely which one? Well, the exit we just went through, right? You became self-conscious about the world around you, and as a result, you exited it, right? You had a way out. Now here's a different thought, right? I don't explore this, so I'm just going to give it to you, and then we'll stop and come back to talk a bit more about this on Wednesday. Here's a different thought. So the way that the woman who wrote this book, Deleuze, puts it, that there's a sort of inability to re-enter authentically what you have exited through this ironic structure. You can't give somebody a box of chocolates in the same way on St. Valentine's Day after you've had these thoughts. That's the thought. You are forced into this ironical position. But it seems to me that there's another possibility, right, which is the comic reinvestment in the structure. It's not this, right? It's neither that you're the cool ironist who can't make anything out of this anymore, but you sort of think something like this. Actually, you know, if you do this with this kind of knowledge, you can actually bring back some of its romantic magic. Why? Well, why is that? Well, look, because each of you now understands something about it, so that it becomes a kind of form of play, right? You're not being taken in by it. You don't think, oh my goodness, the deep feelings of your heart are revealed when you write roses or red, violets or blue, whatever the thing, but I love you, right? You don't think, oh man, that's so moving. No, what you think though is that, well, something like this. These are the things, these are the best things we have to do with each other, as long as we're not kind of taken in by them. That is a different way of inhabiting the structure, right? Finally, here's a thought about the work world, right? One of the things that you can do, if you just see it as meaningless labor, it takes on an alienated quality, right? It's no longer something you can invest in. But where religion offers you a way to reinvest something in it, you can see it all as serving God or prayer, and that changes the nature of what it is you're doing. Right? That won't work for everybody, and I'm not suggesting that you should try it. I'm just saying that there are ways to put something like the magic back in without you're blinding yourself to what it is you're doing. So it might be this, that the father in the story, the Senate tells us, though he's alienated from his work, he doesn't see any meaning in that. It's not like he thinks cleaning the toilets and scrubbing the floor is something that's really great to do. But because he does it for his family, it takes on a larger meaning, which does make it worthwhile. So we might think, in what larger, that's another way. We're not blinded, we're not thinking, oh, this work is transformative and it's really wonderful and I'm doing a very valuable job. Actually, most of us don't do that, right? Our jobs are not that valuable, and if we stop doing them, nothing very much would happen, right? But nonetheless, they can, even though we know that, we don't have to be blind to it in order to make them do something worthwhile for us. Okay, let's come back on